Welcome, Dr. James Beckett, Sports Card Insights. Thanks sponsors, Beckett Media, Beckett Grading, Beckett Authentication, ComC.com, Burbank Sports Cards, Mike Stadium Sports Cards, Heritage Auctions, Hugging the Scott Auctions, Upper Deck, Panini, and Topps. Last part of my conversation with Patrick Ryan, P. Ryan, about the nuances of Shill, what it is, what it isn't, what he did wrong. You know, when people are talking about Shill, a lot of it has to do with intent. Whether you're, as I say, defensively shilling, bidding, or encouraging bids when you're below the reserve as opposed to trying to bid up to the new high price. So again, we get into that. I don't try to do timely episodes, but I think this is a more in-depth, more nuanced conversation of what shill bidding is and isn't. Thanks, Patrick, for getting the ball rolling with that.
Adam Gray, real 27
I
guy.
know,
I have a lot of respect for. We talked a lot about we actually need higher fees because it would eliminate. I'm happy to own this item.
Transaction costs. But it's not the way the world is working. It's not the way it's working in your business. Transaction fees are being driven down.
Yeah.
What we're trying to avoid are abuses, illegalities, and things in the hobby. And most of the things we're talking about, they're not felonies. There may not even be misdemeanors, but people say, that doesn't seem fair to me. And yet, if it's within the rules, I was watching the Giannis, your second best Milwaukee Buck rookie that you also got some of, but he had this most outrageous traveling that was not called. That is illegal. It's upsetting to me as a basketball purist, and I'm not going to get anywhere with it. In fact, it's going to be shown on lots of highlights, and it's in effect promoting the athleticism of these great players. So it's not bad news is bad news for the sport. That bad news is still news.
Yeah.
This shill bidding stuff is just overblown. 50 years ago, there was shill bidding.
I had someone, a low-level employee who wanted to remain anonymous from an auction site saying there are multiple sellers where 50% of the items are going to the same person every time. And that buyer, 90% of their buys are from the same seller, and it's an anonymous marketplace. So what does that tell you? Now, that auction house can see that, right? But they can't prove the connection, so they don't stamp that out as bad behavior.
In America, we're supposed to assume somebody's innocent until proven guilty.
True.
That doesn't mean we shouldn't investigate. We
100%.
shouldn't presume they're guilty, but that's why they have grand juries. That's why they have indictments. They're bringing charges or they're doing discovery. And it's the reputational damage, not just to that auction house, but also to the whole hobby. Well, in fact, the other word that's used in shill pejorative is artificial, that you're artificially inflating. I don't see you doing anything artificial.
You talk about assuming innocence. It was so funny to have people fighting for why they're mad at me, but they're like, he's uniquely innocent because he ratted himself out. That's the proof that he didn't do anything wrong. And they're like, you should dislike him because he's a wealthy, smug collector. Okay, I'll listen to those arguments. And I'm like, no, he's unethical. And they're like, no, he's not unethical. If he's unethical, he would have hidden it. So it was just funny to hear this chatter of why I'm an unlikable hobbyist. Meanwhile, 90% of people felt bad for me because they knew I was just getting dumped on.
Try being a politician. If you make a mistake, you are called a liar. If you rely on certain facts that are not the other facts that other people say, you're not mistaken. You are a liar. It's not an occasional liar. You are a liar to the core. It's victimology, and it's a situation of you judge me by my actions, but I'm going to judge you by the motives that I'm going to impart to you. That's not fair.
That's a fantastic point, because one thing this issue prevented me from doing was I'm very upset at PSA about a matter. And I was about to go on scorched earth rant. So by being humbled, it made me look at this. Here's what happened. I submitted a couple signed Ichiro debut tickets. Okay. One was a box office copy and one was a Ticketmaster copy. Now, ticket collectors, we prefer the box office because it's got the team logos. The box office came back a PSA 2 with a 10 autograph. The Ticketmaster came back a PSA 8 with a 10 autograph. I submitted these to be costing me $200 each. Did not get an upcharge on the PSA 2. The PSA 8, they wanted to charge me $500 for. They said a PSA 5 of a season ticket copy sold for $3,700. And I'm like, that's way more valuable. So there were no real comps. I said, I don't trust your comp. I go, if you'd like to buy this from me for $5,000, you can. And of course, they didn't do that. And I go, what are my options? We'll send it back to you raw. And I should have thought more about it. So I just paid the $500. Then listen to this. I sell it on eBay via Probstein, sold for $1,700. Now, that was probably a little low, but it certainly was nowhere near 5,000. So I was going to go on a rant, and keep in mind the pricing specialist's name and contact information is in this thread. And it's this guy that's not been in the hobby but 3 years, and you would assume side with the customer. So I was going to go on a rant about that, and lo and behold, I'm just biting my tongue and dealing with it. That issue, that PSA upcharge is becoming problematic for a lot of people.
Going to make you look like this controversial guy, Patrick, which I don't think you are. I don't think you shy away from trying to enjoy the full hobby, but
Correct.
But it does point out these larger entities, of which collectors and PSA is one, fanatics, absolutely huge, and the heritages and the goldens and the larger auctions, they have to have the legalese. And if PSA is giving you an option, you have an option, the same option that was in the contract.
Yep.
And you're saying, which is what the hobby is really good at doing, it's saying, is they're offering you door number 1 or door number 2, and you're saying, no, I want door number 3. I want to go to arbitration, which actually could be a door, but they want an additional alternative. You did have the right to say, you know what, just give me back my ticket.
Yep. And I didn't.
But the due process or the learning experience that PSA missed out on, this is customer bad will. This is Nat Turner saying, we want to inspire collectors to collect because it's safe, easy, and fun. That is his motto. Did he do that for you? They did not fulfill their brand motto/promise.
I'm in the middle of a grading conundrum in general because I've sold a lot of my high grade PSA 10s, like my PSA 10 Kobe refractor, because it's like I sold my messy PSA 10, and guess what? I replaced it with a PSA 7. So I have a card that's a PSA 7, and I have $800,000 in my pocket, or I could have had the 10. So for me, I've become a lot less of a grade snob. A lot of my stuff has moved to Beckett if it's for my personal collection. And if I know I'm going to want to sell it, I am still going with PSA, but I've got this big middle ground where I don't know if it's a PC item or a selling item because it's just really hard to figure out all that stuff. So I've moved a lot back towards Beckett. So anyway, we're in a weird space grading wise and obviously value wise. Jeff Wilson, who got into some hot water, not bragging, but he was happy to get a big upcharge. I was like, firstly, it's a hard card, it's a Curry dual 10. It was the night Tops Now card, number to 5. They charged him $4,000 to grade that thing because it was a 1010. I don't think there's a lot of comps on that card because there's only 5 of them. He was thrilled to pay it, and people got mad at him for praising PSA for doing that. And I'm saying to myself, I think that card would have cost $500 for Beckett to grade. I couldn't justify that difference.
Actually, I'm doing a podcast episode explaining that and trying to do it in a fair way without saying, hey, Beckett is the solution, but Beckett is an option for cards like that. But even Jeff presented with that, he's saying, I don't want to save the money with BGS. I want to pay that fee. And it established, in effect, a higher comp than it would have been just by the fact that it got that upcharge. How can we make the hobby better? Nat Turner, how can we make it safer and more fun? And safer is the main thing they need to be doing. I think it's their first adjective. I'm wealthier than the average guy. You're wealthier than the average guy. Let's leave it at that. Okay.
Sure.
There is a theory in collecting that you buy the best copy you can afford. Okay. You are somewhat refuting that now to say, no, I'm going to buy the best copy I can enjoy that I think has the price to value to enjoyment ratio.
Right.
I'm like that too. In fact, I'm epitomizing that by slogging through dollar boxes and having fun making a 500% profit. Okay, here's the analogy. The wealthiest guy in town doesn't necessarily have the best house in town. And there's some super wealthy friends I have. They do not go around looking for the best house they can afford because they can afford any house. They do exactly what you've said, what you're doing. They buy a house they can enjoy that has the amenities or the qualities or the look that is appealing to them, but it doesn't have to be the finest of the finest to where they're paying a world record price for their house. In fact, the wealthy people I know don't brag about how much they overpaid.
Right.
In fact, some of the shill bidding problem is the fact they were shill bid up gives them additional bragging rights because it put it up the 12.9 million with the Wondershine thing.
Right.
There's bragging rights for being the new world record price. And whether there was shill bidding involved with that, they don't care.
Right.
But the climate of people wanting to continue to pay more and to bid things up and up is what we're in. You
Yeah,
can't complain both ways, I don't think.
So my answer is actually a bit more nuanced because it's not just about having the messy 7 versus the 10. I'm actually chasing signed copies. So for example, I have a Mickey Mantle signed 1952 tops. It's authentic because someone colored in the blue background a little bit. It looks gorgeous. It's a 10 autograph black Sharpie. I paid $200 for it. Who knows what it's going for now? And so I sold my 4 and my 5. But let's just say I had a 6, right? So what's a 6 worth right now? 200,000, 300,000? I don't even know, but I would rather have the signed copy lower grade because that's true scarcity. There's 17 of those, right?
Even though you're really wealthy, you're
Yeah.
thinking in terms of like trade, which is
Yeah.
really getting back to the hobby roots. You didn't have to trade, but you said, I want this one more than those 2 or this one and all that stuff. I actually do have friends that have a lot of houses, like 6
Yeah.
or 7. Okay, now that's a little overkill. So you don't need that. But a lot of people have 2 houses and 2 very nice houses, but they don't have to have the nicest house over everybody unless that's just their thing.
Because there's a nuance to a house, just like there's nuance to a collection.
Exactly.
And here's the other thing. I want actual scarcity versus grade scarcity. I understand people liking grade scarcity. I'm not going to bash it because it's proven to be a very good investment thesis. But for me, like a lot of the things that I've sold recently, they come back up every 30, 60, or 180 days. So it's just a function of money. I'm going after things that are rare. That's why I went so hard after this Ruth. And I'm selling a lot of stuff that I can replace again when the next auction pops up to finance that Ruth. So for me, it's about real scarcity. I'm an autograph hound. I chased autographs as a kid. I also think it's presenting some real nice natural scarcity. And I'm glad I was a little bit ahead of that curve.
I don't think that curve is going to be a crush.
Right.
But what you just walked through of the scarcity, the rarity of a card, and just having the card is way more important than a rarity, condition sensitive card.
Yeah.
At some point in the future, there's going to be a shrinking of that. There'll be less demand for cards that are only conditional rarities. Common cards, I wouldn't want to be holding the bag on that.
Yeah.
I want to hold a card that not many people have. As I said, I want to buy cards that aren't for sale.
I'm trying to do it. The other thing too is I do think there's less PSA 9s and less BGS 9.5s than people realize. These pop counts aren't accurate.
Yeah.
Jason Kuntz admitted to me that he's cracked 400 Jordan 9s and he never bothered having them removed from the pop report. So the PSA 9s and the BGS 9.5s might be a lot more scarce than it seems. Not saying people need to go play that angle, but for me, if I can own a 9 at a tenth of the cost of a 10, I'm going to do it now as a collector. But more importantly, I'd like a signed version or something that differentiates it a little bit.
I'm questioning whether any 10 should be 10 times the value of a 9. I'm talking about PSA only has a 9 and a 10, the 900% premium. I'm not sure that'll always stand up.
I think it'll shrink. It has
and if it shrinks, then you would have been better off holding the 9 or
Correct.
9 9s or 10 9s.
Exactly.
Like I say, when you go to accumulate a bunch of 9s, I agree, there's less of anything, but I think there'll be more.
Yeah. Time will tell.
I think the future will not be rough on the true rarities, I think, because there's just not enough to go around. There's enough to go around of Ken Griffey Jr. 89 upper decks. They should all be 10s.
What's funny is that one might be trading at a 20x multiple. I mean,
that's crazy. It's a corner of the sheet, probably. You can tell the story, but in 20 years from now, is that going to be a story? I don't know. It's going to be, I've got this iconic card. Are you going to apologize that it's a 9, that it's mint condition?
The Griffey. So I had this 100 card case, the 100 iconic cards. I stripped it down and I now have a treasure trunk.
Right. I remember. Yeah.
So I just did that. So you got to come to Houston. What I do is you pick the item that you like the most and I take a Polaroid picture of you and then you sign the Polaroid and the Polaroid goes into the trunk. So it's a much more immersive collecting experience. So the Griffey that's in my trunk is a PSA 9 with a 10 auto. So, you know, he's still living. There could be a million of those, but it just stands out. I also have a Griffey debut ticket in the trunk. So it's a little different.
I want to help build the hobby to be foundationally strong.
I just have to deal with the backlash because I did make a mistake, but I didn't make the mistake people thought I made.
You wish you would have done things differently.
Yes.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
And probably you had a sinking feeling when you saw it.
Yes. And it's why the next morning I said, hey guys, can you email me a list of all my auctions? And I should have told them then as soon as I saw the list.
Yeah. Just hang in there. The hobby, there's some bad guys out there. You're not one of them.
That's another matter.
There's some bad guys out there. There's people that have addiction problems or other kinds of proclivities. They can't not do this bad stuff. They're a kleptomaniac. They're just compelled to do this wrong behavior. When they get caught, they say, I'll never do it again. And then they do it again. Okay. Shill bidding, people need to direct their productive energy toward, which hopefully Jeremy's doing, to try to put together, can we have an agreement that all the auction houses ought to abide by certain standards?
Yeah.
That we don't patronize ones that don't. That's upsetting. You're telling me there's an auction house that knows there is, let's just say, suspicious bidding activity, and they're not investigating it.
It's unfortunate. And look, there's a lot of the content that came out has been very good. Most of it's been fair, but like Jeremy's actually putting his money where his mouth is and is working towards at least getting the data out in front of people. And it was shocking. The number of people who didn't realize there were hidden reserves in the state of Arizona, like, it's good. I had no idea so few people knew that. There's always some good coming out of bad.
Shill activity to me is not shill when it involved an implicit reserve.
Sure.
That's very different than trying to manipulate to a new world record price, duping somebody, manipulating somebody. Because the consigner, whoever owns the card, made more money because of the shill. The auction company made more money because of the shill. The buyer of the card knowingly bid a price. That doesn't mean there are no victims. The victims are everybody else that now has a comp that is not a true comp.
Yep. We got to get better and we got to get smarter.